I'll go ahead and kick things off now that we're just after 7. Thanks to everybody who's joined so far. Appreciate you guys being on time. And here we go. So CRES, as many of you likely know, is a volunteer-based organization with a mission to support 100% renewable energy deployment throughout Colorado. And we do that by hosting educational events such as this one, engagement opportunities, although those have been kind of few and far between during our continued COVID era here, and connection to networking opportunities across all Denver communities. And so, as a part of this mission, we establish our values every year, which are renewable energy, emerging technology, efficiency, diversity, and inclusion, and belonging in community. So we are just one group that is part of a statewide, nonpartisan, nonprofit, 501c3 membership-based organization. We have other chapters throughout the state of Colorado and Fort Collins and Boulder and southeastern Colorado. So and Jefferson County. So we appreciate you joining our chapter here in the Metro Denver chapter tonight. So what to expect? I'm going to go through a few announcements. They're going to be relatively brief this evening for you. I will turn it over to our policy expert, Jonathan Rogers, who can join, who's joining here now to help us, go through those policy updates, and then we will turn it over for our feature presentation. So on to my announcements. I hope that you all become a member because it is very fun to have a big group of people here to engage with. You can do so by visiting us at our website, www.cres-energy.org. And we want to hear your feedback, especially as we've been starting to play around with the idea of returning to in-person events. We miss you all and love to see you. We're also aware that COVID cases are increasing again. So please share with us your thoughts about your comfort level returning to in-person. You can do so by sending us, questions or chats tonight, or also emailing us at any time at mdcres@cres-energy.org. If you have other thoughts in addition to just whether or not we want to return back to in-person around speaker series events, around topics you'd like to hear covered, please share those with us as well. We always appreciate your engagement. And we always appreciate your donations as well. So if you can and are able to, there's a few different ways you can help to support us monetarily. One is through donating online through our website. Another is through Venmo donations. And the third, and probably the easiest way to do so in most consistent fashion, is to change your charity of choice on Amazon Smile. And anytime you order anything from Amazon, just go to smile.amazon.com instead. And then a small percentage of those proceeds go to support CRES. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Johnny, for our policy update.
Great. Thanks so much, Lindsay. Big updates here. I talked about this last month. The Department of Commerce is doing an investigation of solar imports to the U.S. Roughly 86% of all solar panels in the U.S. are affected by this, and it has effectively created a crisis for solar installations in the country. There's been a lot of pressure on the Department of Commerce, which is supposed to be an independent body from political interference, but the politicians are doing everything that they can to try to sway a decision more favorably. So I at least am hopeful in my work, and I'm sure many others of our members are very hopeful that there can be a quick resolution to this issue. Right now, it looks like August is when initial guidance will be released from Department of Commerce that will hopefully help to calm things down significantly and get us to a point where we can continue to resume solar projects in the U.S. Fortunately, a lot of capacity has been canceled or delayed, and we're seeing on projects we're working on in Denver, prices are jumping, 15, 20% for overall project costs, as the material cost of those modules is pretty much doubled. But hopefully that will be calming down pretty soon. Next slide. So the legislative session wrapped up last week or earlier this month. And there were a couple really exciting wins for climate and energy. The State House has continued to build on momentum that really started in 2019 with our greenhouse gas reduction requirements and attention on electric and gas utilities to decarbonize their systems. Focus this year has turned towards strengthening building codes in Colorado, creating incentive programs and new grant funding for higher efficiency electric heating and appliances, as well as incorporating EV, electric vehicle readiness, into building codes for commercial and multifamily buildings. If you're thinking about a heat pump, if you install it after January 1st of this upcoming year, you'll qualify for a 10% tax credit on the installed cost of that system. That's space, water heat, can be air source, ground source, kind of you name it. So we'll be excited to see folks be able to take advantage of that program. The State House is also putting additional dollars towards improvements that can help clean air, and in addition to making a big climate impact. Really excited to see that $65 million that'll go towards replacing diesel school buses. And then this last bill I thought was a fun one as well, and relevant to our conversation last week with Denver Parks and Recreation, thinking about water in our state and in our city. The state will be creating a program to provide financial incentives for homes that voluntarily replace their yard with more water-wise landscaping. So if you're thinking about a xeriscape project, keep your eye on these state programs that'll be rolling out to help provide you some dollars to do so. And one more slide. Great, and another call to action locally, Denver's Climate Action Rebate Program is still up and available. Up to 80% of the costs associated with things like heat pumps, EV chargers for home wiring, solar battery storage, and more are available. The e-bike program, over 3,000 vouchers have been handed out to Denver residents. The program's temporarily on a pause to see how many of those get cashed in and what that does to the overall program budget. But we're expecting to see continued releases of e-bike vouchers over the course of the rest of the year. So there's a mailing list that you can sign up for to stay informed as to when those opportunities will be available. And then, act fast to take advantage of these while funding is available. You can learn more at denvergov.org/home-energy. And that's it for me. Thanks everyone for being here, and looking forward to Geraldine's presentation.
Thanks so much, Johnny. Appreciate your update. Just a few more from me, and we'll turn it over for the big show tonight. So I hope that we will see many of you back here next month, Thursday, June 16th. We will hear from Chris Hine, who works at NREL. He'll join CRES to discuss the impact of wind turbines on wildlife. So he's an expert on how the wind turbines impact several different species of wildlife. He'll talk about different solutions that he and others in NREL have been partnering with different industry experts to come up with to try to meet our energy needs, while also being cognizant of our environmental and wildlife preservation goals. So I hope you'll join us back here for that. And without further ado, I am very, very excited to introduce Geraldine Link. We're very lucky to have her here with us tonight to learn more about climate change in the ski industry. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Geraldine. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for having me as a guest speaker tonight. My name is Geraldine Link, and I direct public policy for the National Ski Areas Association, or NSAA. And I thought I would just start by telling you a little bit about the organization. We have about 340 ski area members at National Ski Areas Association. We're based in Lakewood, Colorado, We've been in Colorado about 30 years. We were previously in the Washington, D.C. area, but someone in a very wise move decided they wanted to ski, so they moved the association to Colorado. I have been directing public policy for NSAA for 25 years this fall, which seems crazy to me. Same job, and I love my job, and I'll just give you a few insights into what I do on a daily basis. I focus a lot on public lands policy, so natural resources and public lands. We have 122 ski areas that operate on forest system lands, and that represents about 60% of the skier visits across the country. So the majority of ski visits occur on federal land. So I spent a lot of time as the liaison with U.S. Forest Service, and I also spearhead our sustainability and climate initiatives for the industry. And my focus is really on Washington, D.C. NSAA focuses on the federal level. We have a lot of state associations across the 37 ski states that have their own staff, and those state associations focus on their state legislatures. And so I'm sure you're familiar with Colorado Ski Country USA here, based in Denver. And that is the state association for skiing in Colorado. We work very closely together with all of the state associations, especially on sustainability and climate and advocacy. So just to go backwards a little bit in time, I spearheaded the start of the Sustainable Slopes program for the ski industry in 1999. We started by talking to stakeholders about what an overarching environmental framework should look like for the ski industry. And before then, I felt like there were resorts doing good things, but we didn't really have an overarching framework or a policy. And so we started that in 1999. And then in the year 2000, we adopted what we call the Sustainable Slopes program. That program it has many components to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight. But we have programs underneath Sustainable Slopes that specifically focus on climate. One of those is our climate challenge, and that started 10 years ago. The climate challenge has 55 ski areas in it, and it is a pay-to-play program where resorts have to go through 5 steps. They have to inventory their greenhouse gas emissions. They have to set a target for reduction of their greenhouse gas emissions. They have to take an action every year to reduce their footprint. And that requirement is something that cannot be satisfied, for example, by purchasing RECs. It has to be an on-site project, or it can be a power purchase agreement as well. And those have become more popular in the ski industry in the past, I don't know, say 5 years. So reduction is a really big part of this program. And then the resorts also have to do advocacy on climate solutions, and they have to do 4 different kinds of advocacy every year. And then they have to report on their progress every spring. NSAA collects their data, and we work with a team of sustainability consultants and engineers called Brendel Group. And we've been working with them since 1999. They're an awesome shop based in Fort Collins, but they also have an office in Denver and in Salt Lake City. And Brendel Group reviews the results of the climate challenge, gives it a technical review, follows up on any red flags, and ultimately we report in September every year on the progress of our climate challenge. And you can always view those results on the public side of NSAA's website, which is nsaa.org. And we have 10 years worth of climate challenge reports up there to view. We also have, over 20 years of Sustainable Slopes annual reports up there as well. So all kinds of information if you're interested in digging in a little further on what ski areas and the ski industry is doing on sustainability and climate. We also have a grant program under Sustainable Slopes, and to date we have issued $700,000 in grants under that program. There's cash grants and there's also in-kind grants, and the in-kind grants right now are low E snowmaking equipment, and so 2 resorts win that grant every year and install low E snowmaking equipment from a snowmaking company called HKD Snowmakers. So I'm just trying to give you a general sense of what our program looks like in terms of mitigation, reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, and then outside of the climate challenge, we do a lot of advocacy as well. So our climate challengers, the resorts are doing advocacy, and then NSAA is doing advocacy as well, again, on the federal level. And our advocacy really started back in 2002 when we formally adopted a climate change policy. And the policy, honestly, it has aged well. It's something that we still look to from time to time, but the basic premise of it is reduce, educate, advocate. So a lot of the same things that we've been doing since 2002. And our advocacy has definitely changed over time, although it's been fairly consistent. So back in the early 2000s, we were advocating with members of Congress on, for example, McCain-Lieberman legislation. We weighed in on cap and trade legislation. We have weighed in many times on renewable energy tax incentives, extending those kind of tax credits and incentives. We would really like them to just be permanent. So that's something that we've worked on over the years. We also endorsed the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, or EICDA, which is the Carbon Fee and Dividend bill that Citizens Climate Lobby has worked, very hard on over the years. And a number of NSAA's members have also endorsed that legislation, and state associations as well. So more recently, we have been focusing on the Build Back Better bill, the $555 billion tax or climate bill that was part of the Build Back Better bill. And we have obviously pivoted because it seems that Build Back Better in its first form is no longer viable. So we have been working on advocating for passage of, we'll call it Build Back something, whether it's a bipartisan measure, and there are talks underway with Senator Manchin, Senator Murkowski, other members of the bipartisan Senate Climate Solutions Caucus. And then also we're still supporting a reconciliation-based climate bill that would provide, hopefully $555 billion, something close to that. So we continue to work on that front as well. And I thought I would just talk a little bit about our other focuses. We also lobby and have over the past on federal regulatory rulemakings, and that can be things like the Clean Power Plan or vehicle emission standards. There's a whole lot of issues on the regulatory front that we have supported over the years. And our basic mantra with climate change solutions is we're going to need them all. And so there really isn't one that we don't like. We try to engage effectively and meaningfully depending on what is in front of Congress, what is current, what's getting attention in Congress. But we have weighed in over the years, and we do that through a variety of ways. Some of it is face-to-face meetings with members of Congress. And again, there's 37 states that have skiing, and so we kind of throw out the net pretty wide. Sometimes we have our board of directors come to Washington and meet with members. We also write op-eds, and we engage with caucuses in Congress. And we have a Congressional Ski and Snowboard Caucus, specifically, that is a bipartisan caucus. We have roundtable discussions on climate with that caucus. And we also have, reached out to the Conservative Climate Caucus and offered to speak on the impacts of climate change on the ski industry. We definitely work with both sides of the aisle, and we always have. We are the business voice for ski industry climate solutions. And we also have lobbied along with other businesses through CERES and CCL and a bunch of other great groups have organized the LEAD Days in Washington, which is Lawmaker Education and Advocacy Day. And so NSAA, our member resorts, and our state associations all engage with members of Congress through that program that's now 3 years running. So that's kind of a sense of who we are, the kind of ground we try to cover. We're also part of coalitions like We Mean Business, and we are all in. It used to be we are still in, but we are all in. It's the most current. And so we're always trying to look for ways to have our voice be heard in Washington and to engage with other businesses, joining forces together to talk about the impacts of climate and how important it is to solve it. It's very much an economic issue. I want to shift gears just for a little bit too and talk about our work in the area of resilience. So, every year when we have a slow start to the ski season, and that happened definitely in the start of this season, the media starts talking about climate change and skiing and what is going to happen to the sport, the industry, mountain communities that are very much connected to ski areas. And I just always have to comment that, we're not a business that sits around just praying for snow and hoping that it comes and firing up our snow guns when the natural snow isn't there. We are focused on the future, planning for the future, and making good business decisions to improve our resiliency and boost our resiliency in the face of a changing climate. And it's pretty complicated stuff. I think a lot of folks think about climate impacts on the ski industry being loss of ski days. And that is definitely something that we have data on, and there are shifts in the winter season. So starting later, ending later, it's the one constant is constant change for us. And while we pride ourselves on being really adept at managing changing conditions, it's a real, climate challenge is a huge threat and a real challenge for our industry. And so we work on investing in infrastructure and other things that will help us boost resilience. And some of the examples I would throw out there are, like in the snowmaking realm, and snowmaking is an operational tool. We've been using it since the 50s. That's what it started. But it's also become a resilience tool for ski areas. And so as nights get warmer, it becomes harder to make snow. As snow becomes, it depends. Sometimes it's less plentiful. It's challenging, and we have to make more snow. We have rain on snow events increasing as a result of climate change, and they present their own set of problems. So definitely, though, we are focused on water resources, water facilities, investing in those. Some sustainable on-mountain water storage projects are, I think, going to be more plentiful in the future. And so those are some of the expenses and impacts that CERES are addressing right now. We use data from NOAA. There's a state-by-state summary that you can access online. We provide it to our members, and we look at that data because every place is going to be impacted differently by climate change. And so in the Midwest, for example, we have ski areas that are going to see extreme rain events. And so we've had examples of those resorts investing in overhauling their stormwater drainage systems, making them much more effective so that base areas aren't flooded, and then taking that water and storing it for snowmaking and irrigation in the future. So we have basically resorts that are following what we call our climate resiliency toolkit, where you understand the science of climate, you understand the impacts locally, and then you look at your vulnerabilities, your risks. You look at your capital, what you have to spend on it, and then you take action to address those. And it's not just snowmaking. We have extreme wind events that will only increase in the future. Those wind events slow down and stop chairlifts. It's actually built into the chairlift. They have sensors. And so, there's resorts investing in fencing to try to shield chairlifts, especially in the unloading areas at the top of the mountain. And then I'm just going to talk briefly about our other need to be resilient to wildfire risk. And this is a huge, huge issue for ski areas. We had a ski area in California just this past summer where 80% of the trees at that ski area were burned and destroyed. And not so much the facilities, but the trees were definitely impacted by the POWDR fire in California. So we've got resorts doing a lot on wildfire risk reduction. And some of that is vegetative management, removing hazardous fuels and brush, creating defensible space at resorts. We've invested a lot in fire detection, response. We're planning for evacuation, and also looking at how do we have our snowmaking systems, which have millions of gallons of water, ready in the summertime when we're not going to be making snow, ready for fire response and suppression. And so we're busy. We're doing a lot of work on climate, and we, as an industry, I think, you have to do all three things. You have to take action to mitigate your footprint. You have to do advocacy for broad scale climate solutions, and you have to do resilience work as well, because things are changing quickly. Things are unpredictable, and we plan to be around a long time as an industry. So that is really a summary of the things that we're working on. And I would just say that the ski industry, we're not new to the climate change conversation. Again, we adopted our policy in 2002. We're as frustrated as anyone that climate change legislation, like broad scale federal climate legislation, has not passed Congress yet. We viewed the infrastructure bill as a great down payment on climate action, but we continue to talk to members of Congress about the fact that we need action on climate. And we definitely talk about the impacts of a changing climate, not just on our business, but on a mountain community. And we're talking about rural communities, mountain communities across America, well, the northern part of America. And those communities really rely on ski areas for jobs and economy and tax revenues. And I would even go so far as to say they rely on snowmaking, because snowmaking benefits the entire mountain community and rural economy. So we are also not just focused on policymakers in DC, the state associations focus on policymakers at the state level, but we also are working with mountain communities. Like MDCRES reach out and work with local governments and other stakeholders in mountain communities on this topic. So it's a really, really big one for us, and it's really central to NSAA's mission as an organization. Safety is a really important thing for the ski industry, and sustainability and climate is another absolutely critical issue. And I would say it's one of the issues where we put collaboration over competition. So you have ICON and EPIC, everyone working on sustainability and climate. And I wanted to highlight that we do have the largest 4 ski companies, which is Vail, Alterra, Boyne Resorts, and POWDR. They all joined forces in 2021 and came together and formed what they call the Climate Collaborative Charter. And it's just their way of saying we need to come together even more as an industry to focus on climate change solutions and do everything that we can to solve this major issue. And so we work together with those major companies. They are part of our program. Their big call to action to resorts is to be engaged in the industry, join these programs, join Sustainable Slopes, join the Climate Challenge, and do your part to help solve climate change and move the needle. Because again, we feel like it's going to take all business and the federal government to really make a difference on climate. So I would like to pause there because I feel like I've been talking a lot, and just see if you guys have any questions on those 3 major areas that I've covered, which are the mitigation, advocacy, and resiliency. And actually, you can ask me anything. So just go right for the questions.
Great, thank you. So feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or type it into the chat box. I will unmute you if your hand is raised so we can hear from you directly. And if it's in the chat, I will read it on your behalf. So there's actually one question here, 2 questions here related to biochar. So Ron says, presumably many of your members have wood-fired space heating stoves, and is curious if any are making biochar, which is a leading method of greenhouse gas removal. Apparently, it's also a leading method of reducing wildfire. So curious if there's been any activity or discussion around biochar within the organization.
So that is a great question, and I would say it is not a mainstream, it's not an issue that we talk a lot about, but it is starting to come onto our radar, and it's something that I would like to learn more about. So if there's any resources that you can point in my direction, I would really appreciate that.
Great. So Ron, if you have anything that you'd like to share, I can make sure that we pass that along to Geraldine, and I would love to hear from you. Sounds like you've got quite a bit of knowledge on the subject. The next question comes from Jerry. Does NSAA have an affiliated PAC? And if so, does the PAC endorse candidates or make campaign contributions?
So great question. We have a PAC called Snowpack that we started a really long time ago. And to be honest with you, it wasn't all that successful in terms of the level of donations. And I would just say the reason is that ski areas really like to keep things local in their giving. I mean, not all of them, I'm making a gross generalization, but we found that resorts, they like to focus their campaign donations on, well, sometimes it's state level, but also federal level, and be in the driver's seat with that. And so we did have a period of time where snowpack was active, and we did make donations. We don't endorse candidates for office. We tend to engage a lot with committee chairs. You know, like once a member of Congress is in that leadership position, we definitely focus a lot on those committee chairs. So we have a PAC. It's really not active, and it's something that we've talked about more recently. Do we revive it? But I feel like there are other organizations too that do a good job with candidates. The League of Conservation Voters, Protect Our Winters, focus more on candidates, and but at the same time, ski area leadership, they do make donations to candidates, obviously on an individual basis.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Jerry, feel free to chime in there with any follow-ups or raise your hand if you have any further questions on that front. Our next question comes from Jim, who asks if individual ski areas have specific carbon reduction goals, and if so, are they tracked and visible to the public?
Yes, great question, Jim. So there are a number of ski areas that have carbon reduction goals. And the Climate Challenge program that I mentioned at the kind of beginning of my remark, those resorts are required to set a goal or a target for greenhouse gas emissions. So they set the goal, and then they also have to report every year on their progress on that goal. And so if you want to see some examples of that publicly on our website at nsaa.org, you can see Climate Challenge annual reports there. And at the end of the report, it goes into specific resort information and what the resorts have reported over the past year. And I also wanted to mention that there are clearly other programs out there besides the Climate Challenge, and we encourage resorts to be a part of any program. It doesn't have to be our Climate Challenge. So the one great example out there is Vail Resorts. They are they use the reporting protocols, and they have a commitment to zero. So they have an annual report that they put out on their progress in meeting their commitment to zero goals for that program, and they are public in terms of what they report as well through that program. Then there are other programs as well. Stoke Certified is a kind of independent program that some resorts report through. And I'm sure there's others that I'm forgetting right now, but there are also resorts that just put out annual reports on their sustainability, even if they're not officially part of a program.
That's great. Thank you. And just a question in general about any relationship that NSAA has with non-designated ski areas. So is there a relationship with the backcountry skiing community?
They're with backcountry or cross-country?
Backcountry. But I guess cross-country may be of interest to some too, so maybe you could speak to both.
Sure. So there are just a couple of resorts that have cross-country ski area operations associated with them, but there is a separate association of cross-country ski areas. So they're a separate entity from NSAA. There's a little bit of crossover just because, again, there might be some common ownership of a downhill ski area and a cross-country ski area. As far as backcountry, we are not a consumer organization. We are a trade organization. So we have some interaction with backcountry interests and stakeholders when it comes to the use of public land. I mentioned the 122 ski areas that are on federal land, on Forest Service land. They operate under a special permit, and we have non-exclusive use of those permitted acres. So there are backcountry ski areas, backcountry skiers that utilize ski areas. It depends. Every ski area has a different policy. Different regions of the country have different policies on that. But, you know, for the most part, I would say the backcountry skiers have their own organizations that they work with. And we haven't really joined forces on climate advocacy, but it's definitely something that could be of interest.
Thank you. A question here from Jim as well. So artificial snow making uses a huge amount of water. I know you referenced to that. So do you know of any new technologies that are close to delivery that would generate snow while reducing water use?
Absolutely. So we call it machine-made snow, not artificial snow, because it's actual snow. It's frozen water and air mixed together. So a couple points there to unpack. One is that snowmaking has become much more efficient, not just from an energy standpoint, but also from a water standpoint, as technology has improved over time. And ski areas also use automation for their snowmaking systems, which is really crucial to efficiency and optimizing systems at times so that you do reduce energy and water use, because you can make less snow if you know, if you have more data at your fingertips. So one thing I want to point out about snowmaking and the water use is that it depends on where you are, because it's going to change by location, and it can even change, you know, from year to year. But in Colorado, for example, on average, 80% of the water used for snowmaking returns to the watershed. And so 20% is lost to evaporation and sublimation, those two processes. But, you know, of the water that is used for snowmaking, 80% returns to the watershed. And just want to point out that resorts are investing in water storage and have for many years. A lot of times their reservoirs or water storage projects are done in conjunction with mountain communities. So towns and counties, not just the ski areas. And those reservoirs allow ski areas to use that water during times of year when they need it, obviously, in a way that is less impactful on streams. There are still, you know, there are definitely going to be direct withdrawals from streams for some snowmaking, but a lot of it is coming from water storage, especially in Colorado. So yeah, I think we've focused a lot on efficiency with snowmaking and making it better. NSAA has 400 supplier members of our association, and a lot of them are snowmaking companies. And, you know, really that's their expertise and their specialty. And just to loop it back to our Sustainable Slopes program, we do have a grant program that provides low E equipment to ski areas. And it's typically going to be smaller resorts that are maybe not in a position or don't have the capital to make those kind of upgrades and improvements in their snowmaking systems. So every year, 2 resorts getting those grants is really going a long way to, you know, allowing a lot of ski areas to advance and improve, not just the larger ones.
That's great. That's exciting to hear about. And kind of switching gears a little bit, but still keeping in line with the systems at ski resorts. There's a few questions in here around electrification and transportation and equipment, so I'll group them together. So one is around, is there a move to electric grooming machines? And then broadly speaking, there's a question about electric transportation within ski resorts themselves, and then trying to promote more sustainable means of transportation to the ski resorts. Obviously, those parking lots fill up pretty quickly. We've all seen as skiers here. So I know that's a few things. I'll let you parse it out, and happy to repeat components if that's helpful.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and I would say definitely electrification is on our radar. And, there are resorts who have specific goals. And I would say many resorts are, focused on that. And just to throw out some examples there, we have a lot of resorts have EV charging stations at the resort. Guests can use them at no charge. I was in Vermont 2 years ago, and just crazy example, but Killington, they had 67 charging stations for electric vehicles at the ski area. So I think those are becoming much more common. A Basin recently added some. I'm just trying to think of some that were just really recent in the past year. Ski Sunlight also just added EV charging stations. So that is a big focus. In terms of transportation, yes, that is part of our Sustainable Slopes program and our focus. And resorts are not only looking to electrify their fleets, and we do have electric groomers and also electric snowmobiles that are being piloted and used at ski areas. We did a webinar on that earlier this year with a Colorado specific program. So those are advancements that are starting to be used in the ski industry. And there's always going to be challenges with really cold temperatures and batteries and high altitude. And so these kind of newer technologies, sometimes they take a while for adoption, but we're definitely focused on it and trying to educate our members on those opportunities. And so I would call that not widespread, but definitely in the pilot or beginning stages for those. And then just for resort guests, resorts do have shuttles for employees and guests. Resorts like Snowbird invested a lot in a ride share app that was just really innovative, trying to get folks out of their cars. Parking lots are definitely filling up, and we also have a situation where so many people, because of COVID, are re-engaging with the outdoors and just really recognizing the value that outdoor recreation plays in their lives and nature and getting outside. So we've seen big pressure on parking lots at ski areas. Some of those from backcountry users, by the way, and then from resort guests as well. So I think that that big transportation puzzle is something that we need to solve as a nation, and it's a tough one. We're definitely not Europe, where people are on trains and taking 3 or 4 trams to get to a ski area. So, but resorts are definitely engaged on that issue and investing in transportation initiatives that provide incentives for guests and employees.
That's great to hear. And actually, speaking of Europe, curious if there's international organizations that you guys partner with to try to learn and share best practices for, for management across ski resorts and ideas and all that, or are you really focused solely, especially with the advocacy piece, I imagine, focused solely on the U.S.?
Yeah, so we have Canadian resorts as members of NSAA. So we have members of our climate challenge that are Canadian resorts as well. And advocacy it's tough. I mean, it's hard enough to keep up with, I feel like, all of the different policy proposals that are out there in the climate arena for the U.S., but we try to help the Canadians engage as well. And so you have to learn the lingo, like Parliament Hill and other things like that. So we definitely have Canadian resorts and some under common ownership, like Alterra Resort Company, Vail Resorts. They have Canadian resorts in their portfolio. So there's more crossover, I would say, with Canada. With other countries, it's really hit or miss, and there isn't an international, ski resort association. However, there is a lot of information sharing that goes on and invitations to come speak at one of their conferences and share what we're doing. They'll share what they're doing. And we also, from the very beginning, when we formed the Sustainable Slopes program, we were asked by ski areas in other countries like Spain and Australia, can we take your stuff and run with it? And we said, absolutely. We're all working for the same goal here. And so there's lots of programs out there that are probably similar to ours, and we're all for it. And just recently, in fact, with the Olympics, and there was a big focus with this past Winter Olympics on the snowmaking and the visuals of brown mountains and then a white strip of snowmaking for the Olympic events. And we had resorts and also associations in Europe reaching out and saying, what are you guys doing on snowmaking? What kind of studies do you have? How can we work together? So we're actually embarking on a snowmaking study that will start this June and go through November of this year. And we definitely pledge to share our results with those other countries.
It's wonderful to hear that collaboration is happening, because this really is a global issue. So that's great. Got a few more questions here. One from Caroline, who is a graduate student working with a local ski resort on electrifying an on-mountain dining facility. That's great, Caroline. She's wondering if you know of any resorts that have done this type of work, such as building emissions reduction. They're looking at things like heat pumps, kitchen equipment, and other efficiency measures.
Yeah, I would look to Aspen Skiing Company as a good example. And I feel like they are committed to electrifying their buildings and new buildings being electric. So I think they would be a good resource there.
Fantastic. Thanks for that resource, and thanks, Caroline, for the work that you're doing. It's great to have you on. The next question comes from Garrett. So does the NSAA have any authority to hold ski resorts accountable for emissions reduction? Understanding that there is a requirement to create targets and report data, but he's wondering if there's any penalty or forcing functions to ensure that resorts meet those targets.
No, there definitely are not. This is a voluntary program. And so, this is the nature of an association. You definitely need to meet the requirements of the program, but if you fall short of your goals, we're not going to kick you out of the program, if that makes sense. We try to, keep as many in the fold as we can. And so we just want to encourage resorts that are taking these actions and setting these goals, because they do it in a public way. And, with our climate challenge, for example, you do have a third party looking over your shoulder, reviewing your information. And it's important to do that because they do sometimes find mistakes. And so we definitely value that review and, third party input there, but we don't kick a resort out if they don't meet their goals. I'm not aware of someone who does that, honestly. There's a lot of voluntary programs out there that work with businesses like World Wildlife Fund and others. So I think the incentive there is to keep them engaged and working on those targets.
Yeah, carrots, not sticks. I think That's great. Follow-up question from Garrett. What resources are available to ski resorts since they fall under NEPA and not under county, city, or state jurisdiction?
So can you repeat? Did you say NEPA like NEPA or EPA? Sorry.
Oh, NEPA. Yep, NEPA.
Okay. So what resources are available to resorts?
Yep. And Garrett, if you want to add any more color to that, feel free. But that's the question.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have to go through the NEPA process at the public land ski areas for everything we do. You know, cutting a tree, putting up signage. Our special use permit requires ski areas to go through that process, you know, for any kind of changes that we're making at the resort. We can do routine maintenance, obviously, but when it comes to making changes, you know, building trails, adding snowmaking, we go through the NEPA process, and the resorts pay for that themselves. The Forest Service used to pay for the NEPA process, and those days are long over. The agency doesn't have the funding for that or the staffing, and so resorts pay for the all of the studies and all of the you know, the process that goes into making a decision on public land that is funded by the ski area.
Okay, perfect. Circling back to transportation, Greg is wondering, is NSAA in the Colorado area in any way involved in the I-70 Coalition's Break Up With Your Car campaign, which is a CDOT initiative to provide alternative public transportation to ski resorts?
Yeah. Colorado Ski Country USA is Colorado's state ski association, and they would be the ones that work on those issues. We're handling resorts in 37 different states, so we can't get that far down in the details with any one individual state. And also the state associations really, it's their territory, it's their, you know, decision what they support, and so we do not get involved at that level.
That makes sense. It'd be a lot to track.
Yeah.
So in terms of ski resorts, you know, obviously they're you just said responsible for making a lot of these investments in any infrastructure that they want to, you know, involve, or any policies that they want to help try to support. But do you know if they're paying attention to their investment portfolio? So do you know if they've started to kind of take a look at sustainable investing and ESG investing and making sure they're not supporting companies that are propagating fossil fuels, as an example?
Yeah, no, that's sorry, that is a fantastic topic that the ski industry had. Well, there was this great education session at the snow show a few years ago on that. I want to say it was Bank of the West was speaking and talking about the need to divest from fossil fuels, and also just make your financing decisions, your banking decisions with a climate lens. And I don't have a lot of information about who has followed up on that and you know, how they're doing that, but I do think it's something that the outdoor industry in general is moving towards, if I could say that. But yeah, I think it's crucial that happens, and there was some good education on it. But I have focused more on ski area operations, honestly, in the education that we do for resorts, and then also advocacy for, you know, all kinds of federal climate solutions. So it's definitely a topic worth exploring more.
Yeah, great. And it's a good takeaway for this group too, if you're considering calls to action from this. So I think that's a good one. We'll just finish up here with two more quick questions. So I know you shared a bunch of different tactics and considerations that you guys are working on to support the ski industry in their efforts to mitigate, adapt, and advocate for climate change solutions. How would you say, what are most resorts doing or focusing on first to reach their climate goals? How are they aligning with the NSAA?
So I would say there are like low-hanging fruit kind of projects that resorts went to initially, and doing energy audits, energy efficiency, green building, lighting retrofits, all of those kind of basic things that you would do in your operations. Ski areas are definitely working on. Their snowmaking systems are part of that too. So I would say that was kind of the first wave, and on-site renewable is also something that a lot of resorts have. And more recently, I would say, resorts are looking more to like the power purchase agreement and that route for reducing their emissions. So really a collection of different things. And there's so many like good stories out there, resorts doing things. We try to capture that through our annual reports. But yeah, I would say there's a lot of work going on out there, and some of it is on transportation, some on electrification. So there's all different kinds of efforts, and vehicle fleets is another one. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and I would say, like, as our climate challenge progresses, it gets harder and harder if you have to do projects every year to reduce your footprint, and you've been in that climate challenge for a while. You have to get pretty creative. So we've had also a lot of focus on waste and composting as well. So that's a big focus for ski areas too.
That's great. Thank you. And given that, skiing is a sport loved by many, right? And there's probably a bunch of different demographics that are supportive of, skiing and want to be engaged. And obviously certain demographics are more supportive of climate change and climate science than others. So do you see any backlash from any of kind of the ski resorts constituents who, maybe tend to vote more conservatively for people who are not as supportive of climate policy?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we just had a great conversation about that topic at our national convention last week, and there are many, many resort leaders who will tell you, you just have to do what you have to do, and no one is going to make a move and not have detractors on social media. Everything you do is critiqued, and you have to just keep marching forward. And there's going to be naysayers on social media. You're going to have guests who might disagree with you, but I think the bottom line is that leadership has to be evidenced and strong, and you just have to keep moving on. So we have resorts in conservative states doing great work on advocacy with Republicans, Montana, Idaho. We have some great examples there. And again, it takes courage, but we really love skiing, and we love the mountains and that lifestyle, and all that brings with it. So I feel like we're not just protecting an industry. The people who work in the ski industry love the outdoors, and they want to protect the mountains and the climate. And so I don't know. I think there's definitely been some customers who might say, I don't agree with your values, but at the same time, I would say we just hit an all-time record skier visit number. We announced it last week. It was 61 million skier visits. And so we're not, if we have to turn away a few who don't agree, there's a lot more in the pipeline.
Sorry about my, he's decided to chime in agreement with your, with your sentiment there. So I apologize for that. And I think, that also ends up wrapping up our questions. There's no more in the queue. So a big thank you to joining us for joining us this evening. Is there any kind of final thoughts you'd like to leave us with, or final calls to action for how our members and the CRES organization can support you on your mission?
Well, I would say, there's always more to learn. And even though I've been doing this for 25 years, I love learning about new things. So I was just going to say my email is glink. It's really easy, glink@nsaa.org. And if there's any resource sharing that you think would be relevant to the ski industry, I'd love to see it and, invite that kind of sharing of information. And I just also want to say thank you so much for having me and keeping me on my toes with all those great questions. They were really good. It's really hard to prepare and guess what kind of interest and questions you're going to get, but this has been a really good conversation. So I appreciate the invite very much, and thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, and thanks for sharing your contact information. I'm sure the group really appreciates that, and thanks to all of our members for some great questions and wonderful engagement tonight. So hope to see you all soon, and enjoy the snow tomorrow, I suppose. Speaking of snow.
Yeah. Great.
All right. Well, take care. Thank you again so much. We really appreciate you, and not just for joining us tonight, but for all the wonderful work you do. So we'll see you on the slopes the next winter, and we'll be keeping an eye out for all of the studies on snowmaking that are forthcoming. So thanks again.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.